Now I keep seeing articles all about Pizza Babka and it being all the rage these days. And as a fan of Stromboli, to me I was instantly drawn to this idea. Seems like it's been around for a while, but it became popularized as of late by a guy named Bill Clark, a Brooklyn resident. He was a restaurant owner in Brooklyn and now he shares his recipes on a Substack newsletter. So I brought Bill on to ask him some questions about the dish and if he's got any tips on how to make it. So this is the conversation and let's just jump right into it. So if I understand it right, you're from Brooklyn.
Yep.
And you had a restaurant, correct?
Yeah.
Tell me about the story.
I had a restaurant in Prospect Heights with my business partner, Libby Willis. It's called Mimi's Diner. We were there 3 years. We closed in November. And I was the pastry chef there.
Was it obviously a COVID-related closure?
Yeah, unfortunately.
That's tough, man. I'm sorry to hear that. Fortunately, you transitioned into Substack, which is essentially a newsletter. And so you're sharing your recipes there, and that's where this Pizza Babka came from. So tell me about how you kind of got into the making of it, why you made it.
I used to make a lot of babka at the restaurant, and we did savory babka. I used to do an everything bagel babka at Mimi's, and so babka is like something that I do. And the recipe, the pizza babka actually came from my mom used to make pizza bread all the time, which is just like like a
Stromboli.
Stromboli, essentially. Yeah, essentially. So I just decided to kind of like take it up a little bit and turn it into a babka.
So is it essentially just a Stromboli? You split it in half like you would a babka and you sort of braid it from there?
Yeah, I think to me the big difference between what would make this more of a babka versus a Stromboli is the thinness and how many layers. I think of a Stromboli as having that like classic spiral versus this is, sliced down the center and braided more like a traditional babka.
So maybe roll the bread, the dough out a little thinner?
Yeah, absolutely.
And anything else on top? I think you put like a little garlic butter on top?
Yeah, garlic parsley butter on top.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you? Like, if they want to sign up for your Substack, where can I direct them?
It's A Piece of Cake by Bill Clark.
I'll leave a link down below so anybody who's watching can go subscribe and can support you. And best of luck to you in whatever you do.
Thanks so much.
Take care, buddy. It's gonna take about an hour to make the dough, so you want to always do that first. So we're just going with a cup of warm water. Good to have it around 100, 110 degrees. And a teaspoon of dry yeast. Just gonna let that sit for like 10 minutes. While that blooms, we'll get the dry ingredients together. 2 cups of flour. Doesn't have to be perfect. 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt. After a few minutes, you should see some action with the yeast. It should smell yeasty and be bubbling and foaming. After about 10 minutes, it should be ready. Add it to the flour and then mix until it comes together into a ball. It's gonna need about a half cup to 1 cup of additional flour that we're gonna work in by kneading. Work the dough, flipping with one palm towards you and then stretching away from you with the other palm. And if the dough becomes too sticky at all to work with, that's the dough sending you a message saying, add a little bit more flour. Use a bench scraper to help manage the dough. You're gonna wanna add flour and knead the dough until it's just slightly tacky. You could use a machine for this. If you do, add that extra half cup of flour to the machine at the start. Once the dough has been kneaded for about 10 to 15 minutes and a tight, slightly tacky ball has been formed, get it into a bowl with a little bit of oil and get it covered with some plastic wrap. Let that dough rise for about an hour. It's been about an hour and the dough should be ready. I just want to grate about 1 pound of some dry whole milk mozzarella. A bit of parchment paper makes it a lot easier to work with this dough. Turn the dough out and let gravity do the work until it plops onto that parchment paper. Then with a greased rolling pin, gently roll out a rectangle as thin as you can. Once the dough is shaped, shingle the thin pepperoni slices across the surface of the dough, followed by an even layer of the mozzarella cheese. Then roll the dough onto itself, using the parchment paper to help you along, exactly like you would a Stromboli or cinnamon buns. Once you get to the end, fold the end onto itself and seal it. Then take a bread pan and help gauge where to cut the dough. I cut it the size of the pan, but I recommend going a little bit longer because I didn't account for the twisting of the dough, which results in losing a couple inches in length. Then carefully cut that log in half with a serrated knife. Once cut in half, you're going to slice the log down the middle lengthwise very carefully. Once it's split, you're going to stand it up, and then you're going to two back ends and pinch them together as sort of a starting point. And then begin to twist the two cut halves onto each other. And once it's completely twisted, pinch the other end together to seal. It's kind of tricky, and you might begin to think it looks like a disaster, but just go with it. I promise, it's going to work out. Transfer to the bread pan. Next, we can prepare the garlic and herb butter. Just finely chop up some parsley, get that into a bowl, grate up some garlic, melt a half stick of butter in the pan over medium heat, and then add the garlic and herbs and cook until fragrant for about 2 to 3 minutes. Then baste the dough with that garlic butter and then sprinkle a little bit of grated Parmigiano cheese on top, and then pop that into a 425-degree oven for about 30 minutes. While that cooks, I'm just going to reheat some weekday sauce on the stove. I'll leave a link down in the description for my weekday sauce recipe. After about 20 minutes, I check on the babka and then baste it with a little bit more of that garlic butter, rotate it for even cooking, and then cook it for about 10 more minutes, and then it's perfect. You just want it to look golden brown with caramelized cheese bits and pepperoni fat crisping up the edges, and it should just look really delicious. One last baste of the garlic butter when it gets out of the oven. Let it cool until you can remove it from the bread pan, and then let it rest before cutting. Letting it rest allows the cheese to sort of set, which is going to help hold this babka together. Slice it up, serve it up with some of that weekday sauce, and take a look at what a beautiful thing you just made. That's good. First thing I think of is Domino's cheesy bread. This tastes very much like Domino's cheesy bread. That garlic oil on top, that's a nice touch. Obviously a lot of similarities to Stromboli, but with all that added exposure, you get these like melty pieces of cheese that crisp up. The pepperoni fat kind of gets around there and gets it nice and crispy on the edges. It's a flavor bomb. So go check out Bill's website down below. There's going to be a link in the description. You got to give this a try. That's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself.